I'm Alex. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a nonprofit called the AI Education Project. We're a 501c3. We were founded 4.5 years ago, and we've been the leading advocate of AI literacy in the K-12 system. We have a fast-growing catalog of free learning products, and they're modular, so it's designed to plug into existing classes. This is not an Introduction to AI 101 class. This is embedded learning across English, science, math, social studies. And I'm clicking, so just want to make sure. Okay, there we are. Oh. Yeah, I see. Okay, so can we go to, I'm just going to say next slide because for some reason the clicker is not working. So next slide. Great. We have a bunch of free learning products. You can go to our website to check them out. And over the past 18 months, as you wouldn't be surprised, we've been first to rapidly scale our teacher training offerings in response to this massive deluge of interest and demand for understanding and curiosity about what is this thing, generative AI. We've also raised, next slide. We've also raised philanthropic funds from leading foundations and companies that are on the forefront of digital citizenship, STEM education, workforce readiness, including Google.org, Ballmer Group, the McGovern Foundation, New Schools, Venture Fund, and many others. They've been helping us with really sort of thinking through how do we take this like nascent idea of AI literacy and bring it to not just all schools, but really the most underserved and at-risk schools in the country. AIEDU has been at this conversation for quite some time. So I'm going to give you a very short backstory to give you a sense of, how it happened that we were so early to this conversation. So I kind of stumbled across AI education. My background is in community organizing. I worked on President Obama's re-election campaign before joining the administration, where I was working at HHS. And after my time in politics, I was just very lucky. I had a mentor in my life who was like, Alex, you need to go and follow machine learning, big data, whatever, that's what they called AI at the time. And so I found myself working for a number of different AI companies, and I was in San Francisco, and I was part of this burgeoning conversation about AI and its potential massive impact on society. So fast forward to 2018, and I was hired by this early pioneer in computational linguistics called H5, and the CEO basically was like, I want to hire you to train legal practitioners and judges, because his concern was that they don't understand how AI works, and it's being used in courtrooms, and it is being used in courtrooms today. So I was doing a bunch of these training programs, and I had just done this successful training in partnership with, I think it was NYU, could have been Stanford, but and I was on the phone with my mom. And so what you need to know about my mom is she's a political refugee from the Lebanese Civil War, and she's also a Title I educator in Akron Public Schools. And I was telling her about this school training, and she's like, oh, that's so cool. You should come and present to my kids. I feel like this is so relevant to them. And I was like, oh, it's almost stopped dead in my tracks, because it was flabbergasting that Akron Public Schools, Akron, Ohio, is actually on the list of the top 20 most at-risk cities most at risk for automation. Next slide. And the fact that Akron Public Schools wasn't having the same conversation that the technologists that I was meeting with, it was striking, because I had this assumption that, of course, our schools are talking about AI and the future of work. That wasn't the case. As I dug into it, it turned out that of the 13,000, 14,000 school districts in the US, we could find fewer than a dozen school districts that had some kind of AI literacy or AI curriculum available to their students. And it would take a lot more than 10 minutes to explain why that is, but you could probably guess some of the reasons. And I would say it boils down in large part to the fact that certainly in 2019, the belief was that AI literacy was actually something that happened in computer science classes. And so we were actually dealing with I'm sorry, guys. Okay, let's go back to the previous slide. Okay. The challenge of computer science education is a really big one, and it isn't going to be solved, or wasn't going to be solved fast enough to deal with this new sort of like paradigm of education. Let's go to the next slide. So I've been talking a lot about so I told you a little bit about AIEDU. I want to talk about why AI is such a big deal. So I want you to picture this. This is 2045, 22 years from now. You're at the Thanksgiving dinner table, and you're telling your grandkid, and you will be telling your grandkids about the year 2023. And that's the year that AI changed everything. And it's hard to comprehend, but this moment right now, it's as big of a deal as the Wright brothers' first flight, like the Sputnik moon landing, the birth of the internet. Next slide. Birth of the internet. And some are saying that it's actually even more important than all those technology revolutions. And I just want you to imagine a world where, next slide. Actually, let's go to the previous one. I want you to imagine a world where an educator could, in minutes, develop tailored lesson plans and projects for every student, a level student in her classroom. Imagine a world where every student could get personalized help with their homework, even if they don't have a parent or guardian at home who knows anything about Euclidean geometry or covalent bonds. Imagine if students could build immersive 3D environments in the first month of their introduction to computer science class before they even learn a single coding language. Imagine if any lesson could be instantly modified to be culturally responsive, to connect learning with the lived experience of students. And imagine a world where written tests and applications are no longer a barrier for brilliant neurodiverse students who struggle with traditional forms of assessment. Imagine a world where English language learners have access to the same level of translation services available to UN delegates at a fraction of the cost. And all of these are possible today with large language models or generative artificial intelligence. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to the next slide again. Even though the smartest folks in this room, you might be asking yourselves, like, what is an LLM? I'm going to take a shot at explaining these tools like really briefly, but I want to reassure you that even if this might feel overwhelming, it should feel a little bit overwhelming. You're not alone. So even the most cutting edge folks in the space, in most cases, have only been using these tools for months and certainly less than a year. So AI tools like ChatGPT, they're powered by something called LLMs, or large language models. You might have heard of generative artificial intelligence. I would say these terms are more or less interchangeable for our purposes. And you can think about it as software that's really good at creating stuff, all kinds of stuff: emails, poems, scripts, business plans, recipes, even software code. Next slide. And language models can write because they've seen all sorts of examples of what we write and how we write. And we're talking literally everything on the internet. So the LLMs digest up billions, trillions of words, and they use the most powerful supercomputers ever created to play what is essentially a guessing game to figure out what words should come next. And they play this game over and over and over again. So this is a bunch of slides. We're gonna go to the next slide. So first we start with a phrase like, first saute some onions and then stir in the tomato sauce. And so this is, we're beginning the guessing game. Let's go to the next slide. So at first the AI starts guessing. Initially it's wildly wrong, but we keep playing the game, and you can just sort of flip through the slides a couple times. We keep playing the game, and eventually it gets closer and closer. Let's go to the next slide. It gets closer one more time, or closer, still a little bit closer, one more time. Okay, presto. So, and then it figures it out. It's like, and then you stir in the onions and reduce the pot to a low simmer. So it's figured out that this is a recipe for making spaghetti and meatballs. And we now have a large language model. And to be clear, the AI doesn't know what a pasta recipe is. It doesn't know that you want a pasta recipe. But it does know that tomato sauce is often the first ingredient in the 600,000 pasta recipes that it's read. And the training data is pretty much, next slide, it's pretty much anything the engineers can get their hands on. So books, blog posts, forums, articles, scripts, restaurant menus, and social media threads. And it's not just the best books or the best social posts, but everything, all the stuff, the bad posts, the trashy posts. And you may be wondering if that's a problem, and it is, but we don't have time to get into that. So once it's assembled this massive data set, the language model then tries to figure out the underlying patterns. So this is like the individual characters, how they're connected, the words, the syntax, phrases. And the goal is, you can go to the next slide, the goal is winning basically iterations of these guessing games. Now ChatGPT took this to the next level because what they did is they added this additional ingredient, if you will, which is human feedback. So they actually had like thousands of real people that were going through and like seeing the AI's responses to different questions and inquiries, and rewarding it or penalizing it based on its performance. And so it was basically making the language model more colloquial and more conversational. And so you combine all that, next slide, and you can do some really incredible stuff. So a Q4 marketing plan with KPIs by department, language models can do that. If you want to write wedding vows in the theme of pie for a pizza-themed wedding, language models can do that. They can evaluate the impacts of macroeconomic policy on the 1985 Live Aid benefit concert. And this is just language, but the same technique, massive data plus gamification and pattern recognition, can be applied to other domains like biology, software, music, video, art, game theory, and even like interpreting whale songs. Because ultimately, all data can be interpreted as language. Music is a language. Video and art is a language. So the technical revolution unfolding beneath our feet basically boils down to fancy text prediction. But why are you going to be telling your kids about this year specifically? And the answer is that before ChatGPT was released in November of 2022, November 30th, 2022, fewer than a couple hundred people had access to large language models. So we went from a few hundred researchers having access to these tools to hundreds of millions of people in the span of months. And so all of a sudden, the world has at its fingertips this insanely powerful new tool. And we're still, I think, collectively wrapping our minds around it and what this means for our work, our lives, our humanity, and also our education system. I'm going to close with a call to action. So Steve Jobs talked about computers as a bicycle for the mind. And if computers are bicycles, language models are supercars. And as educators, we really have to focus on this. We have to work hard to ensure that students aren't graduating high school trying to race on their bicycles against kids who are driving in supercars. It's the most important paradigm of equity in our lifetimes and perhaps in the history of education, full stop. And it's not going to be easy to solve, but it's going to require not just the technologists, but the educators who understand their students and the contexts and the complexities of enacting change. And so I would actually say that this is something that educators are going to lead on, not the technologists. So if you want to roll up your sleeves with me, join my breakout session tomorrow at 1:45 p.m. And so we're going to actually get hands-on and use ChatGPT and other LLMs to tackle tasks that get in the way of doing your best work as educators. Thank you.